Kia ora tātou katoa.
I call the honourable member Aaron Gilmore.
It's an honour and a privilege to always follow that member across the House. And I remember when he had a future, and I remember when he had an idea that he might have been leader of the Labour Party. But what we just heard from that speaker was he has no idea either about this bill that we're debating, either about Labour's tax policy or about anything else, but a great orator and use of flowery language he may be. Mr Speaker, today we've heard some amazing stuff put forward by the Labour Party, and I want to take a little bit talking about that. The bill before us is about simplifying the tax system so it works more efficiently, so it operates in a way to reduce the compliance costs of New Zealanders, to take away $70 million of compliance costs that applies to mums and dads up and down the country. But today, Mr Speaker, we heard the Labour Party put forward the absolute opposite. So we've heard the Speaker from across the aisle there talk about the idea of simplifying the tax system. But what's been announced today, Mr Speaker, is a boon for the tax accountants and the lawyers up and down the country, Mr Speaker. Thousands of tax accountants up and down the country are going to be looking at Labour's announcements and rubbing their hands with glee. We're losing $70 million in fees from the removal of gift duty, but what goes from one side, the other side will give to us back again. Mr Speaker, Labour have put in place a system where tax accountants up and down the country are going to be rubbing their hands with glee. Because what we've got with the announcements today is such a complicated, convoluted, ridiculous system, Mr Speaker, that I don't even think even they understand it. We honestly saw that from the last speaker, Mr Jones. Mr Jones outlined some things that he didn't even understand what even the existing bill is trying to do, Mr Speaker. It's pretty clear, Mr Speaker, that whatever the situation is, Labour's numbers don't add up. We heard from Mr Ho last night talking on this bill that said any bill that takes away $70 million in costs, that raises $500,000 in net revenue, that's not a good idea why that cost should be taken away. We heard from Mr Parker talking on this bill last night, talking about his fetishes with Filipino brides, in reference to incest, and how this bill is going to enhance those things, Mr Speaker. I was outraged, as was a number of my colleagues, Mr Speaker. It was completely irrelevant for what was actually being underway, Mr Speaker. And I encourage many people to go listen to that, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, see, the situation is at the moment 44% of households, Mr Speaker, pay no net tax. 44% of households. 17% of households in New Zealand pay 97% of tax, Mr Speaker. 17% pay 97% of the tax, Mr Speaker. And this bill goes some way to try and remove that. It puts in place a simplification procedure. It reduces the costs by removing gift duty. It puts in place an arrangement where these things called pies, Mr Speaker, or portfolio investment entities, have more flexibility to invest in those things which are productive in New Zealand. It allows the ability for these entities to be able to invest more into land, up to about 20%, and it allows the ability to put in place other simplification procedures that would cover the reduction of costs to taxpayers up and down the country, Mr Speaker, and that's what our government truly believes in. Reducing the burden on taxpayers to put those monies into productive enterprises. Because if we can reduce the cost of $70 million from the removal of compliance costs with gift duties, that means some tax accountant out there, who may be former friends of mine, don't buy the new BMW this year, Mr Speaker, but that money gets in the back pockets of Kiwi mums and dads, and they can go spend it on those things which are productive and useful. And those were the key aspects that came out of the report and review before the Select Committee. It wasn't the issue of the scaremongering of the ability you couldn't protect assets now because of gift duty removal. It was about reducing those costs of hard-working Kiwi mums and dads so they could keep $70 million in their back pocket and invest it more wisely and more productive in those things that they choose to invest in. The only shame, Mr Speaker, is that much of that money, if it's happened for whatever fluke may occur, there was a change in government in the near future, that those earnings at $70 million would be taxed at a ridiculous level. And I'm pleased to see that given the polls that we've seen on the weekend, I think that's very unlikely, Mr Speaker. You see, Mr Speaker, despite what Labor says, and they say here in the House here today and in last night, I think they truly believe that it's right to incur $70 million in costs that's completely unnecessary. For what purpose and benefit, Mr Speaker, we don't know. But look, see, we believe in actually reducing that tax burden so New Zealanders can get ahead, Mr Speaker, and I think that's going to be a positive thing and helps us steering on the way towards a brighter future that we really believe in. Thank you.
I call the honourable member